Qadian is surrounded. The subcontinent is torn apart. Every earthly road is blocked. But this is a story of a divine promise, a story of how, when all worldly doors are closed, Allah supports His community from the skies.
के तारे गवाह सूरज चाँद पड़े हैं मान जरा कुछ विचार कर
Throughout the world, throngs of people hailed the end of the war in Europe.
दूसरी जंग अज़ीम के बाद हुकूमत बरतानिया ख़ुद भी कमज़ोर हो चुकी थी और इंडिया में आज़ादी की तहरीकें चल रही थीं, मुस्लिम लीग मुसलमानों की तरफ से, कांग्रेस हिंदुओं की तरफ से। और 1947 में हुकूमत बरतानिया में इरादा ज़ाहिर किया कि वो दो मुल्कों में इसको तकसीम कर देंगे, लेकिन अभी इसका बाकायदा ऐलान नहीं हुआ था कि उससे पहले ही फसादात शुरू हो गए थे।
हम तो उस ज़माने में उधर थे जबकि ये लड़ाइयाँ हो रही थी और हमको पता लगता था कि किस तरह मुसलमान बेतरह से मारे जा रहे हैं, लड़के मारे जाते थे, औरतें मारी जाती थी और किस्म किस्म के मजालिम किए जाते थे, जो बच्चे बीच में मारे गए और ऐसे ऐसे जालिमाना तौर पर कत्ल किए गए कि बच्चों के पेटों में से नेज़े मार मार के हमने उस वक्त तस्वीरें ली थी और अमेरिका भी भेजी थी कि बच्चों के नाक काटे हुए, कान काटे हुए, पेट चीरा हुआ है, आंखें निकली हुई है उसके बाद और बच्चा तड़प रहा है। छोटे छोटे बच्चे 5-5 महीने के, 6-6 महीने के, 7 साल।
Well-organized and motivated militias, often roused and deployed by local power brokers to help further the territorial and political goals of their respective communities, unleashed waves of carnage that historians would go on to describe as a mutual genocide. Despite this, Hazrat Musleh Maud radiallahu anhu worked tirelessly towards the creation of Pakistan and peace in the subcontinent.
खलीफा सानी रज़ी अल्लाह अन्हु मुसलमानों के साथ देने के लिए पाकिस्तान के हक़ में थे और आपने उसके लिए जो पॉजिटिव जद्दोजहद की है, कोशिश की है, वो किसी और इस्लामी तालीम ने की।
और उसके बाद एक बाउंड्री कमीशन बनाया गया जिसका मकसद ये था कि वो जायज़ा लेके कौन से इलाके पाकिस्तान में शामिल होंगे और कौन से हिंदुस्तान में शामिल होंगे। और इब्तदाई जब ऐलान हुआ तो उसमें पाकिस्तान में कादियान शामिल था। चुनांचे 14 अगस्त को जब आज़ादी का ऐलान हुआ तो 15 अगस्त को कादियान में पाकिस्तान का यौम आज़ादी मनाया गया।
The goal of the border was to have as many Muslims in Pakistan and non-Muslims in India. This is the map of the border that was decided by Sir Cyril Ratcliffe in August 1947. The fighting and movement of refugees were intense in the Punjab region, the same region where the most controversial part of the border was determined. The districts in green were Muslim majority, while the red were non-Muslim. Gurdaspur, a Muslim majority district, was where the problem arose. It was decided that the majority of Gurdaspur would be part of India, and this included the Markaz of the Jamaat, Qadian.
नहायत तकलीफ दे वक्त था। 18 अगस्त को ईद उल फितर का दिन था तो हज़रत मुस्लिम मौद ने उस मौका पर अहमदियों को तसल्ली दी और फरमाया कि हम इस तरह मुतफरक हो जाएंगे, कादियान इंडिया में शामिल हो जाएगा, बहुत सी जमातें पाकिस्तान चली गई हैं, हम मुतफरक हो जाएंगे, लेकिन हमेशा इलाही जमातें कामयाब होती हैं। और फरमाया खुदा का वादा मेरे साथ है कि अहमदियत को कभी मरने नहीं देगा, बल्कि अहमदियत तरक्की पर तरक्की करती चली गई।
दुख दर्द के मारों को सीने से लगाता था, तू सोचता ही न था अपना है या बेगाना.
In the peaceful abode of Qadian, a small plane touches down on its fields for the very first time.
कादियान का जो मंज़र है उसमें पहली दफ़ा एक जहाज़ आया है और वो जहाज़ एक हिंदू जवान थे, पायलट थे, मिस्टर चावला.
And he was always interested in establishing record flying times and flew this de Havilland puss moth plane and a de Havilland gypsy moth planes. And he had already established one record flying between Karachi and London. His interest was to break that record, and for which he was collecting some funds, and asked lots of influential people in the area to fund that flight, including Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Raziyallahu anhu, who ended up donating 500 rupees to him for this endeavor.
हुजूर ने उसका जवाब दिया कि ठीक है हम देंगे, लेकिन जहाज़ को एक दफ़ा कादियान लेकर आओ. तो वो ले आया और कादियान का जो रेलवे स्टेशन है उसके साथ मैदान में उसने उसको उतारा. तो बहरहाल वो हज़रत खलीफा सानी रज़ी अल्लाह अन्हु ने भी एक बड़ा टूर किया और ऊंचा जाके, क्योंकि हजूर की अपनी ख्वाहिश थी कि मैं कादियान को और इर्द गिर्द एरिया को, दरिया ब्यास को, सारे को देखूं.
And I think interestingly, my father, who was only 8, and because the event quite vividly in his book, was part of one of the flights on the last day where multiple children went up for about 7 minutes to see what a small airplane flight looks like. It created a huge interest in him to fly that childhood experience, and little did he know probably at that time that 15 years later he would actually be flying a Jamaat airplane.
My father, Wing Commander Sayyid Muhammad Ahmed, served in the Royal Indian Air Force from 1943 at age 18 till 1947, when Pakistan and India were partitioned by the British.
बल्कि एक रॉयल एयरफोर्स उसके भी थे, एक उनका नाम था लतीफ़. तो वो लतीफ़ पायलट कहते थे उनको. तो वो जो थे वो बहुत लायक थे.
ये अमेरिकन जहाज़ जो थे L-15, ये जो इस्तेमाल हुए थे बड़ी जंग में, अब वो उनके काम के नहीं थे, वो इसको फ़रोख्त कर रहे थे. मोहम्मद लतीफ़ ये ब्रिटिश एयरफोर्स में पायलट थे, तो इनकी ड्यूटी थी कि वहाँ से लेकर ये बम्बई पहुँचाए, क्योंकि हिंदुस्तान वो ख़रीद रहा था जहाज़. तो मोहम्मद लतीफ़ साहब, उनको पायलट ही कहते थे, तो वो लेकर एक जहाज़ कादियान आए. तो हज़रत साहब को दिखाया तो हुज़ूर ने फरमाया कि ये ख़रीद लें. तो वो 5,000 रुपये में वो ख़रीद लिया गया.
This Hindu gentleman was selling a very similar L5 to the Jamaat, which they opted to buy, negotiated the price, signed an agreement, and before payment could have been made, this Hindu gentleman quickly migrated to Delhi without collecting any money. The Jamaat took that information to the CAA, which is the Civil Aviation Authority, which transferred the title of the plane in the name of the Jamaat. So essentially they got that plane without actually paying for it.
And that explains the foresight of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Sani and his divinely guided wisdom, that he anticipated that, thought of that, and thought of purchasing planes in that uncertain time to help facilitate communication across borders, to keep the community safe, not only in Qadian, but also the community that remained in Pakistan.
14 अगस्त से लेकर 31 अगस्त तक हज़रत मुस्लिह मौद कादियान में क़याम फरमा रहे और ये सारा अरसा वो था जिसमें कादियान का ताल्लुक़ बैरूनी दुनिया से कट चुका था। 25 जुलाई को जो रेल आती थी कादियान उसको ही बंद कर दिया गया। इसके बाद अगस्त में तार और डाक का सिलसिला बंद कर दिया गया। गोया कादियान बैरूनी दुनिया से बिल्कुल कट गया।
As the situation worsened, Hazrat Musleh Maud radiallahu anhu instructed Sahibzada Mirza Bashir Ahmad to summon Sayyid Muhammad Ahmad through a midnight letter, tasking him to retrieve the Jamaat's plane from Walton Airport and bring it to Qadian.
And he just got up and left his job and answered to the call of the Imam.
Upon taking delivery of the plane, I found that its tires were almost flat, its batteries were dead, and it was covered in dirt. In those days, due to civil unrest, it was difficult to find any workmen. I spent half a day patching up the plane myself and managed to get it airworthy. I also succeeded in getting it reasonably clean, though in the process I became filthy myself. By afternoon, the plane was ready to fly, and I had been able to locate a map. Despite never having flown a plane of that type before, I was able to manage a test flight. After that, taking Allah's name, I flew to Qadian and reached there in 45 minutes. I knew where I was supposed to land in Qadian, but on my approach, I saw that what looked to be a clear landing strip on the eastern side of Dar al-Anwar was at closer inspection 9 inches of mud due to recent rains. There were deep ruts in the surface, and the plane slipped from side to side as I applied the brakes during the landing. Once I had made my descent, I taxied slowly to an open plot in Dar al-Anwar to park the airplane. After getting out, I stuck spikes into the ground at the tips of both wings and tied the wings to the spikes with rope so that the aircraft would not move if there was a strong wind. I then went to report for my duty. I learned that Sahibzada Mirza Nasir Ahmad would have charge over the plane. He was at the time the president of Qudam al-Ahmadiyya and was also supervising the security arrangements in Qadian.
Those days, as you can imagine, the war going on, partition taking place, the fuel was rationed because there was limited supply of it. This plane, the L5, had a 35-gallon fuel tank. To make the flight from Lahore to Qadian one way would take 6 gallons. So they always needed about 12 gallons of gas to do that twice back and forth.
With a strict quota of only 4 gallons of petrol per week, Sayyid Muhammad Ahmad has to find a way to secure more fuel.
He knew this Hindu Anglo gentleman at the airport. This gentleman managed this Shell fuel petrol station at the Walton Airport in Lahore. And my father had made acquaintance with him through figuring out what his need was. And his need was Lahore was facing a severe shortage of food. And so my father would offer him to fly back meat and vegetables and baked goods, and in return this gentleman would allow him to fill the tank completely instead of giving him rationed fuel. And as a result, he would carry about 35 gallons of gas to Qadian. He would take 29 gallons out and bring back like 9 gallons into Lahore, and then so he can continue doing that. And each time he did that, he would ration or store an additional 20 gallons of fuel in a drum tank in Qadian so that these Jamaat's planes wouldn't get stranded in Qadian. God forbid something terrible happened.
With an adequate supply of fuel secured, the focus shifts towards safeguarding the resources of the Jamaat and surveying the areas around Qadian. Hazrat Musleh Maud radiallahu anhu also summons Deputy Muhammad Latif for his services.
Initially, it was conducting aerial surveys, marking which were Sikh majority towns, Muslim majority towns or villages. And villages where you also had Muslims, but Muslims were a minority, which were probably the most vulnerable. They would also drop off a community member from Qadian to Lahore who would do their business and then return. There was also some exchange of goods needed back and forth.
हुकूमती अफसरान से रब्ते के लिए उन जहाज़ों को इस्तेमाल किया। फौरी तौर पर कहीं ख़त भिजवाना है, कोई पैगाम किसी सियासी लीडर को भिजवाना है, फौजी लीडर को भिजवाना है।
By the time the caravans of refugees started migrating from Qadian to Lahore, the planes would kind of fly over them, make sure everything's okay, and then report it to authorities both in Lahore and Qadian.
ये इस मज़मून के मुसन्निफ़ कहते हैं पायलट कि बाद दफ़ा जब मुसलमान गांवों पर हमले कर रहे होते थे हिंदू सिख, तो मैं जहाज़ नीची परवाज़ करके गुजारता था ताकि वो डर जाएं और इसी के नतीजे में मुसलमानों को उससे निजात मिल जाए। बहुत से लोग मुसलमान काफ़िले जो हिजरत करके आ रहे थे, कादियान चूँकि बॉर्डर के करीब है, लाहौर से सिर्फ 70 किलोमीटर के फासले पर है और हर तरफ बलवाई फैले हुए थे, तो कादियान आने शुरू हो गए। और एक वक्त ऐसा आया कि कादियान की मकामी आबादी जो थोड़ी सी थी उसके साथ 70-80 हज़ार बैरूनी रेफ्यूजी आकर जमा हुए। और हज़रत मुस्लिम मौद ने और उनके बाद भी जो जमात के निगरान थे उन्हें फैसला फरमाया कि हम अपने भाइयों की तरह इनकी खिदमत करेंगे।
This is a narrow street in Qadian, and now we are seeing the same street with very many more people in it on account of the numerous refugees who entered the town at the time of partition.
1 लाख या उससे ज़ायद मुसलमान मुहाजिरीन को रोटी का देने का इंतज़ाम कादियान के लंगर खाने ने किया हुआ था। और हज़रत मुस्लिह मौद की फरासत देखिए कि उससे बहुत पहले आपने अंदाज़ा लगा लिया था कि नहायत ख़तरनाक हालात होने वाले हैं और ज़रूरत पड़ेगी हमें उस वक्त जबकि कहीं गंदम मुयस्सर ही नहीं आएगी, जब कहीं खुराक नहीं मिलेगी। बहुत दूर दूर तक लोगों को भेजा जाता था कि गंदम खरीद के लाएं। उस वक्त तजुब होता था कि इतनी ज़्यादा गंदम की ज़रूरत क्या है, मगर जब ये सिलसिला शुरू हुआ तो उस वक्त पता चला कि इर्द गिर्द के मुसलमान जो लाखों की तादाद में कादियान में पनाह लेने के लिए वक्तन फ़वक्तन आते रहे, अगर वो दुश्मन की बर्चियों से बचा भी लिए जाते तो फाकों का शिकार हो जाते। और अल्लाह ताला के फजल से कादियान के गंदम के ज़ख़ीरों ने उनको ज़िंदा रहने के लिए क़ूत मुहैया कर दी।
खिलाफत है इन्नामे आसमानी, खिलाफत ही निज़ाम मोतबर है।
Qadian remained a sanctuary, feeding and protecting the refugees migrating. Yet, with the siege tightening, Hazrat Musleh Maud radiallahu anhu called upon the pilot for a mission of the highest stakes.
One day, my father was summoned by Hazur, and the summoned instructions were, I'm going to hand you something extremely valuable. This is the most precious item you will ever carry for me, and I want you to take this from Qadian to Lahore. And my father thought that he's about to be handed over some material valuables, and little did he know that he was carrying a really well-used, not in great shape, canvas bag with broken zips, and it was full of papers.
And we all know that Khalifatul Masih Sani's magnum opus is Tafsir Kabir, right? And he has left a treasure for generations to come. So these were notes of the unpublished parts of Tafsir Kabir. So Hazur was so vigilant about this. I mean, this is probably one of the few times where he was directly summoned and said, this is a treasure. I want you to deliver it to Sheikh Bashir Ahmad, who was then the Amir of Lahore. And not only did he request that, he said, I want to ensure that you bring a receipt that he has received this item back. So my father takes this canvas bag, goes to, takes the flight from Qadian to Walton Airport. You know, we were not in the time of cell phones, so he goes to the communication tower at the airport, calls Sheikh Sahab. Sheikh Sahab comes in about 45 minutes. My father delivers the bag to him, asks him to sign the receipt. So my father assumes that the transaction is complete. And then when he sits in the plane to take off to return to Qadian, he sees the bag lying on the ground on the tarmac. So, he's in a state of distress and panic, thinking, what am I going to do? Because, there were many complexities to this. If you're flying after sunset, it's really an impossible mission. So it was close to sunset. And he was thinking, even if I call Sheikh Saab from the phone tower, Sheikh Saab has not gone back home, right? Again, there were no cell phones. So I'll have to wait probably another 40 minutes for him to go home, receive the call, then come back.
So he comes out of the plane, and at that point he has no recourse but to stand there and wait and hope that Sheikh Bashir remembers that he left the bag there. And as he's waiting there, in distance, he sees Sheikh Bashir's car flying at some ungodly speed, so fast that like some wheels were taking off the ground, and he comes right back and picks up the bag and was very grateful that the bag was still there.
By the grace of Allah, the tafsir of Hazrat Musleh Maud radiallahu anhu was safely transported by air. Yet, on the ground, the darkest days were just beginning.
नहायत तकलीफ दे अयाम थे। एमडीओ का पानी भी बंद कर दिया गया, बाहर से कोई सब्ज़ी नहीं आ रही थी, कोई खाने पीने की चीज़ें नहीं आ रही थीं, और दूसरे हर वक्त ये ख़तरा था कि दुश्मन जो है वो कादियान पर हमला करेगा। तो आपने एक जमात के नाम 2-3 पैगाम जारी किए, उन सब का ख़ुलासा ये है, अगर मैं इन हालात में मारा जाऊँ, यानी इस कदर हालात हो चुके थे कि किसी की जान की कोई ज़मानत नहीं थी, हुज़ूर ने फरमाया अगर मैं मारा जाऊं तो फौरी तौर पर खलीफा का इंतखाब किया जाए.
Seeing that there is no way for the Khalifa to continue conducting his duties, Hazrat Musleh Maud radiallahu anhu migrates to Lahore.
शुरू में तो हज़रत मुस्लिम मौद यही सोचते रहे कि मेरा यहाँ से जाना अहमदियों पर बुरा असर डाले, इसको बुज़दिली ना समझाए. आपने फरमाया मैंने तो ये इरादा किया था कि अगर जान देनी पड़े तो मैं यहाँ जान दूँगा, लेकिन फिर अल्लाह ताला ने आपके दिल को इस तरफ माइल किया कि आपको फौरी तौर पर लाहौर चले जाना चाहिए. चुनांचे ये 15 दिन जो बहुत मुश्किल दिन थे हज़रत मुस्लिम मौद ने दुआओं में गुजारे, सारे अहमदियों को दुआओं की तलकीन की, रोज़ा रखने की तारीख फरमाई और तहज्जुद पढ़ने की तलकीन फरमाई, बहुत दुआएं की गईं, बहुत सदक़े किए गए, लेकिन बिलाखिर हज़रत मुस्लिम मौद लाहौर 31 अगस्त को तशरीफ़ ले गए.
फना से हासिल गर्दीन को बका हो.
He leaves behind his brothers and children and appoints Sahibzada Mirza Bashir Ahmed to oversee the affairs in Qadian. Despite the danger, the pilots continue to conduct their duties.
ये फ़्लाइट चूँकि फ्रीक्वेंट जाती थी, बार बार कादियान से तकरीबन आधे घंटे से 45 मिनट वक्त लगता था, थोड़ा सा रूट भी बदलते होंगे, तो बहरहाल वो ये उनकी नज़र में तो था जो नीचे लोग थे, तो फायर का ख़तरा था.
And as he looked down, he heard this bang, and a bullet had pierced the cockpit of the plane exactly where his head was as he turned back, and left a hole on one side of the cockpit and the other one on the opposite side of the cockpit. And he said if he had not moved his head, just maybe 2 seconds later, the bullet might have gone right through his head.
और कादियान पर तो इनका बड़ा भरपूर कोशिश थी कि दारुल मसीह पर भी हमला करें, जो असल मरकज़ था. तो इर्द गिर्द जो प्रॉपर्टीज़ थी उसमें कॉलेज भी था, जामिया अहमदिया, मस्जिद नूर, हज़रत चौधरी रसूलुल्लाह खान साहब की कोठी, ये ज़्यादा दूर नहीं थे लेकिन उस दारुल मसीह से ज़रा परे थे, तो उन पर भी इन्होंने अटैक किए सारे।
कादियान के आसपास मुसलमान गांवों पर हमले हुए, उनमें कई अहमदी शहीद हुए और कोशिश की उन्होंने रात को हमले करने की, अहमदी नौजवानों ने उसका जवाब दिया। वहाँ पे कादियान की मस्जिद अक्सा में एक बम भी फेंका गया, अल्लाह ताला के फजल से उसका ज़्यादा नुकसान तो नहीं हुआ।
In this grave situation, members of the Jamaat continue to migrate from Qadian. Many refugee convoys would depart from Qadian early in the morning and make it to Lahore by the evening on foot.
एक काफ़िला जो था उसकी रिपोर्ट शाम को नहीं आई, उसको पहुंचना चाहिए था। हज़रत साहब आहिस्ता आहिस्ता परेशान होना शुरू हो गए और बहुत परेशान हो गए। हज़रत साहब ने ये हिदायत की इनको, सैयद मोहम्मद अहमद साहब को, कि जाएं तो हज़रत चौधरी रसूलुल्लाह खान साहब को मिलते जाएं, क्योंकि सारी काफ़िलों की इतलाएँ उनको आती थी और वो हज़रत साहब को देते थे। तो ये दरमियानी वक्त में शायद उनको कोई इतला मिली हो। तो मियाँ मुनीर अहमद साहब, हज़रत मियाँ बशीर अहमद साहब के बेटे, वो उनको इन्होंने साथ लिए। ये दो लोग थे।
Walton Airport did not have enough resources for them to fly at night, which required having the runway lit up and having, all the services available. They surveyed the airport first, put out some flares, few that they could. All they needed was a short runway. So there was a longer runway available to them, which they decided not to use. So they used this short runway. And as they get on this runway and start accelerating to take off, suddenly they hear this very loud thud. And obviously they hit something, and the plane comes to a dead halt and it flips over. And my father said he, as fast as he could, he unbuckled himself and walked away from the plane, thinking that fire could catch on and plane would be on fire. And then within a few seconds, he realizes that Mirza Munir Ahmad is still in the plane in the back seat, still straddled to the seat, and so he runs back and gets him out.
देखा तो एक भैंस आधी इधर पड़ी हुई है, आधी उधर। वो रनवे पर फिर रही है, क्योंकि होता ये था कि ये जो लोग छोड़ के जाते थे घरों को, तो इनके जानवर आवारा हो गए, खुले हो गए, कोई उनका वाली वारस नहीं था। तो वो इतनी वो बाढ़ भी नहीं थी एयरपोर्ट के या रनवे के एरिया में, तो वो जानवर इधर उधर फिर रहे थे।
And then as they walk towards the terminal side of the airport, this policeman in arms stops them and asks them where they were going. And they said, look, we just essentially crashed. And only to realize that if they had gone only another few hundred yards, there was a Dakota plane, a large-sized plane, parked right in the middle of the field. And if they would have hit this plane, it would have been fatal for both of them, obviously.
Next day, as Khalifatul Masih Sani was a little bit angry at them because they were supposed to check with Chaudhry Zafrullah Saab before they started this mission. And little did they know, they didn't check with him because they didn't want to wake him up for inconvenience because it was a late hour. But what they didn't know is that Chaudhry Zafrullah Sahab had already received the news that the caravan that they were all doing this for had arrived not at the destination, but was somewhere in transit safe and is expected to come the next day.
Many Muslim minority districts in the Punjab were living in constant fear of the worst. As one plane still remained, Hazrat Musleh Maud radiallahu anhu came to know of one such district in need of dire help.
अब दूसरे मुसलमान जो थे वो अहमदी तो नहीं थे। अजनाला एक तहसील थी, गुरदासपुर ज़िले में ही थी, तो वहाँ बहुत ज़्यादा हिंदुओं ने और सिखों ने मुसलमानों को तंग किया। इस हद तक तंग किया कि वो लोग अपनी घर की छतों पर जा के बैठ गए कि डायरेक्ट ये हमें ना मारें। हज़रत साहब ने कहा कि ये जितनी मैक्सिमम रोटियां बन सकती हैं वो रोटियां बनाएं और ये वहाँ जनाला जाके ये जहाज़ जाए और वहाँ ड्रॉप करे छतों पर। इन्होंने लंगर खाने वालों ने रोटियां तैयार की, पैक तैयार किए, लेकिन उस वक़्त ये मेरा ख़्याल पॉलीथीन के वो लिफाफे वगैरह नहीं थे होते, तो अखबारों के कागज़ों में लपेट के उनके पैकेट से बना के तो वो फेंकते थे, तो वो फट जाता था, हवा में फट जाता था कागज़, तो बिखर भी जाती थी रोटियां। लेकिन लोग ऐसे पढ़ते थे जैसे पता नहीं कब के भूखे हैं, और थे भी वो बेचारे। तो इस तरह की जिस हद तक जमात कर सकती थी उनकी मदद की कि उनके भूख के सामान कर दिया और उनको खाना दे दिया।
Allah's support manifested not only in feeding the helpless from the skies, but in protecting the unbreakable bond between the Khalifa and his people. This time, an urgent message from Hazrat Musleh Maud radiallahu anhu has to be dropped in Qadian.
My father was asked to take some directives to Qadian. And Qadian, as most people will remember, was surrounded by these Sikh villages, and during partition, they were isolated because there were attacks going on the villages by either the Hindus or the Sikhs.
My father was remembering the missions in World War II, and one of the ways to deliver these canvas bags was to have streamers attached to the end of the bag, which would make them visible from afar.
That it had a red, blue, and a yellow ribbon sewn into the bag so you could see it from a distance. He flew very low into Qadian, so low that he was barely above the tree line, and he had marked the spot where some of the Khuddam were present, where he was going to drop that bag with the message in it. And as he drops it, he knew that the bag landed somewhat in the right area. And he also wanted to make sure his plane is not visible to people in the surrounding villages who were attacking Qadian and the police who were surrounding the area.
हुआ ये कि जब वो इन्होंने फेंका ना, तो वो गायब हो गया, वो जो स्ट्रीमर था वो गायब हो गया, और जो फ़ौजी थे उन्होंने देखा कि कोई चीज़ फेंकी है। चूँकि दरख्त थे तो बिल्कुल क्लियर उनको नज़र नहीं आया, लेकिन ये जो दो खुदाम थे वहाँ खड़े ड्यूटी पर, इनको उन्होंने पकड़ लिया।
After they inquired and searched, they couldn't find anything, and they left. Only to learn later that this young man, 6, 7, 8-year-old boy, had found the bag, and he had it sort of hidden under his shirt, and he kept it with him until everybody left, and then he handed that over to the Khuddam that were looking for that bag, and that's how that was found. And my father describes in his memoir that to date, he never knew if that was an angel or an actual person, who delivered that bag.
जो आका से वादा किया हमने मिलकर, दिलो जान से उसको निभाते रहेंगे। जो आका से वादा किया हमने मिलकर, जो आका से वादा किया हमने मिलकर, दिलो जान से उसको निभाते रहेंगे। तेरे दी की खातिर जो आवाज आए, तेरे दी की खातिर जो आवाज आए, हर उस हुक्म पर सर झुकाते रहेंगे। वफा के दिए हम जलाते रहेंगे, ये जश्न खिलाफत मनाते रहेंगे, ये जश्न खिलाफत मनाते रहेंगे।